Bleacher Report and Underdog Fantasy NFL insider James Palmer joining us now on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline. A lot to talk about, James, and a very busy week for you. How's it going?
It's going. I don't want to say I was like, oh, yeah, this is happening. But that's the way that the whole 2 days are going. Don't take it personally. Don't think, yes, this is the next one. Here we go.
I wanted to start with the Geno trade. I personally was shocked. I knew it was a possibility, but I thought they'd just kick the can down the road, extend him, and then figure stuff out later. Were you surprised? Had you been hearing rumblings? I know you guys are all over it.
Yeah, I think that it was essentially this. If you really asked him, I think John Schneider would say, I didn't expect this to really happen. So does he always kind of plan? Of course. Remember how he used to drive Russell Wilson insane, how he was still going to pro days and watching quarterbacks throw
Yes.
when he was in the prime of his career? Like, so John is always looking, yes, and he is always prepared. But I do think they were like, we're fine with Geno. I think Mike liked Geno quite a bit, and I think Clint was comfortable with Geno. But then the numbers got to a point to where they said, whoa, I don't know if that's really what we want to do with a 34-year-old quarterback. Let's see if we can pivot here. And I think that's the part where we always know John's pretty good at, is making sure that eye that I mentioned, he always has, he's looking at something else. And I would always say this too, like, I've never heard John Schneider talk about Geno Smith the way that maybe Pete Carroll did and Mike McDonald did. I'm not saying he disliked him, but I don't know if it was ever as glowing as those two did. And obviously the coach's input's always huge. But, like, I think that started to make the shift when the numbers just were not close. And then when you realize the needs that the team had, and they were dealing with the DK trade as well, and then you realize putting all of that together, you go, maybe we just pivot as an offense entirely. We have a new OC, and maybe we can get somebody cheaper. And I have a plan B, which is Sam Darnold, and it was going to be the entire time while they were working on that trade, that we can save $10 million a year from what we were going to pay Geno, and we get 7 years younger. And maybe there's a little bit drop off in talent, but they're pretty comparable in how they play. Let's try to pivot here and do this. And I think that's kind of where things started to change when they knew the numbers weren't close.
Hey, James, how hard do you think decisions like that are? When you look at the Seahawks offense, you had DK at one point. Jay is in. Geno has shown you that he's good enough to get you into the playoffs. Still got to work on the offensive line. Do you think it was a difficult decision to pivot, or did the numbers scare them that much? They're saying, all right, now our backs are against the wall. We just have to do this.
I think as we're watching this play out, and Aaron Rodgers is essentially holding two franchises hostage in the Giants and the Steelers for his services, I think it shows you, if you have a quarterback, you hang on to him in this league, because who knows what could have happened. You could make that trade, and all of a sudden, even though you've kind of know that you can land Sam Darnold, anything's possible until you land him, right? And then you're all of a sudden, what are your options? Like, I don't think Aaron Rodgers, to my understanding, was ever really an option. Russ isn't coming back. Like, are you going to go get Daniel Jones? Like, it is a nerve-wracking experience to try to put yourself through when you have a guy who a lot of people around the league say, if he's protected, I think you guys have seen it. If he has protection, Geno Smith can play, and he can still play, and he can throw the deep ball, and he's put up good numbers, and he completes a lot of balls. When you're completing roughly 70% of your passes every year, you don't really want to get rid of that guy, but you do have to look at it in terms of how you're building your team. And they're not the only ones that pivoted. Like, you see what, the Vikings ended up doing. They were like, you know what, we're going to switch to the rookie quarterback contract, even though we thought Sam Darnold played brilliantly for us this past year. We won 14 games, and guess what? They just went out and spent like crazy to build their team now around a rookie contract. And so you do have to pivot once in a while. I think John's been good at it. The last couple of tries he's had, it probably gives him some confidence. But yeah, I don't think it's something you don't you go to bed easy going, well, we can just move on from a guy who's throwing the ball really well for us the last couple of years.
Is the assumption among national critics, experts, kind of from the outside, that Seattle is like full rebuild then, kind of related to Bump's question about kind of what they're doing? Or do you see it as, no, I think they think Sam Darnold can help them win right now?
Well, John Elway always said this in Denver over the years when he was the general manager. Like, I don't believe in a rebuild. Like, I don't think that's ever something we're a part of. And well, eventually it did have to happen in Denver when they played. I don't know. I don't have the numbers in front of me. 82 quarterbacks since Peyton Manning retired. Like, until
Roughly.
they found Bo Nix. But roughly in that range. But I do think that is the mindset of John Schneider and company. I do think you had a rookie head coach win 10 games. I think that's outstanding. I think that the defensive side of the ball is really good. I think Ernest Jones is outstanding. And it was great to bring him back. And so, I think you have one side locked in, and I think now the thinking is this, we got our quarterback. We have him on a Baker Mayfield type deal, which was what everybody thought that Sam Darnold was going to roughly get, which doesn't break the bank on what we want to build around him. Like I mentioned, the Vikings, that's always been their thought process. You build the best team around a quarterback, and you try not to pay a quarterback top dollar. And the Seahawks are in that position now. And now you go, we have these picks in the top 92. What is it, 5? We have a new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak, which I've talked to you guys about before in the past. He builds his offense a specific way. That style of offense needs a specific type of offensive lineman, in all honesty. All right, now we get to build it all together with our offensive coordinator in mind and in the meetings on how we build this offense. There's some positivity to that. There's some risk. You don't get the guys in the draft, but you do get to build it now with the offensive philosophy in the building.
Yeah, and they're going to have to build it fairly quickly, right? You have to address that offensive line, which you've mentioned and we've mentioned on our show. But another spot is just the wide receiver spot. You got JSN. We got a lot of Jake Bobo fans here in Seattle. Good kid, love him. You got Derek Young as well. Do you see a veteran out there that they should go get? Cooper Kupp has been flashing on our text lines a lot. Or do you think that you go young and you just focus on the draft, or do you do both?
Well, yeah, I think you're looking at all options. We predicted this, that the market on the receivers was going to be slow, right? The guys that are there and available right now, who you mentioned, whether it's Hopkins at 33 or Keenan Allen at 33 or Amari Cooper at 31, all these guys are on that side of 30. I don't know if Cooper Kupp, if your lines are right, that's pretty similar style of play to JSN, honestly. And I don't know if you have both of those on the field at the same time. You need kind of that replacement on the outside. Now, the part that plays into your favor is the way that Clint runs an offense. I would go back, and if you're a Seahawks fan, watch the first 4 weeks of the season in New Orleans when everybody was healthy and the offensive line was healthy and the receivers were healthy. Those guys were taking shots, and that offense was explosive, putting up a ton of points on the board. Doing what? Running a lot of their plays with 2 receiver sets and going heavy with the tight ends and going in 13 personnel or 12. And so my point is, Clint Kubiak doesn't run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. So I think that's in your favor when you're a little bit short at the receiver spot, but I would add in both. I think you can wait out kind of this receiver group. Somebody like Stephon Diggs, who I think his rehab is going really, really well. But you're going to want to get your hands on him, right? You're going to want to see him, and you can't take those visits until Wednesday. And so I think you can look at this receiver veteran group and be a little patient with it, and also look in the draft. I'd say the meaty part, the buzz, we're still early in the draft, guys, but the buzz is there's 3 guys at the top. And then there's a real chunky middle, as the GM told me. I just wanted to say it that way.
No, I liked it.
There's a very chunky middle to the receiver group, and Seattle's got a lot of picks there.
It's funny. I was literally about to ask, what are you hearing about the draft? Because Seattle's looking at 4 day 2 picks, but that's okay. I will shift gears. What is your expectation?
We can say chunky middle again if you'd like. Yeah,
sure. I'm curious. I know that this is subject to change, so I will not hold you to this, but did your expectations for Seattle season change once they traded DK and Geno?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they definitely do. And I think also you would have had that thought even before that trade, because you're going, all right, here's another offensive system. Here's another change for Geno as we try to figure out what we do offensively. So I think it definitely changes. I think DK is a very talented player. He really is. Now I would say this, when I asked around the league about the DK trade, there wasn't a single person I talked to, whether it's a GM, assistant GM, whether it's anybody in a decision-making role, 0 said that a first-round pick would be coming back to Seattle. 0. If that doesn't kind of tell you where exactly it stands, then, that tells you exactly where it stands. So everybody said that he's a good player. He's not in that top group of receivers, but can he win one-on-one? Can he stretch the field? Can he be physical? Can he be a difficult cover? Of course. But I don't think he's in that top group of receivers. And so, yeah, you're going to miss him for sure, but I don't think it was Jamar Chase going out the door.
I think everyone feels and thinks that Tyler Lockett is going to end up with the Las Vegas Raiders. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? And how much football do you think Tyler Lockett still has left?
I think Lockett brings so much more than just what he has left on the field, and I think that's valued. And I think that's valued as a veteran receiver, specifically in some rooms that need that. I think he still has something for sure. Is he the same player? Definitely not. But obviously everybody's connecting him to Pete and their relationship, and I can see that because that's a young team looking to change their culture, and it's a team that's looking to find their new identity. Those are the values that I think Tyler also brings and will always bring wherever he's at and whatever he's doing. Still will have something as like a third option probably, but also what he does during the week, Monday through Saturday, I think is still valued by people around the league.
I know Russell Wilson isn't a Seahawk anymore, clearly, but I think a lot of people locally are always a little curious to see what he's doing. What are you seeing about where he could land?
It might be tough. It really might be tough because he is directly tied right now as we speak to Aaron Rodgers. And Rodgers is debating between the Giants and the Steelers, to my understanding. He's having conversations with both organizations. I think what the Giants have done over the last 36 hours has made them maybe much closer to the Steelers in terms of talent-wise than maybe they were a week ago. But if he ends up going to New York, he ends up going to Pittsburgh, I think Russ ends up going to New York. And if he ends up going to New York, Aaron Rodgers, I don't know if Russ goes back to Pittsburgh. It would almost have to be like Mike Tomlin and company having to say, hey, Russ, I know you're our third option at quarterback, but would you want to come back? You know what I mean? And he does still talk to DK regularly, to my understanding. So I don't think it'd be like, knowing Russ, I don't think he'd be opposed to going back there because, honestly, if he doesn't go back to Pittsburgh, and this is just that scenario if Rodgers goes to New York, I don't know where he goes. I really don't because the Titans don't have any interest, to my understanding. The Browns just made the Kenny Pickett trade. They're kind of waiting on Kirk Cousins, too. Like, now you're out of spots. And so I don't know where Russ goes, honestly, if Aaron Rodgers goes to New York and he doesn't go back to Pittsburgh.